Zapier and other tools like that just when a new listing pops up on Zillow that meets our or matches our buy box and our investment criteria, it'll automatically bring it to our deal analysis tool so that I could just open it up and I get notified that there's a new one that meets our criteria. It's in the deal analysis tool and I can just look at it and see, red or green, yay or nay.
You're listening to Ice Cream with Investors, a podcast that is dedicated to teaching you how to better invest your money so that you can live a more intentional life. I'm your host, Matt Four, and it is my goal to teach and empower you to remove the roadblocks to your financial success.
All right, Nathan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Matt, how you doing?
Fantastic. Even better now that you're here.
Well, I'll try to keep it that way then.
Well, we like to start with the difficult questions here. What's your favorite ice cream?
I'm going to give you the most boring answer that exists out there. My favorite ice cream is vanilla ice cream.
When you said boring, I said, if this guy says vanilla ice cream, I'm going to be very disappointed.
Well, I guess you're going to hear a lot about what we talk about today, but a lot of the stuff that we do, I like to keep it simple. And for some people, that means boring, but we got a busy life. So vanilla it is. Actually, now that I think about it, there is this one brand in Switzerland where I grew up that makes this meringue, double cream, caramel type. You can only buy it in Switzerland ice cream. That is fantastic, but I would still go with vanilla any day.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, tell our listeners, what's the scoop? What do you do today?
I do a lot of things. What don't I do? That's what it feels like, at least. But I guess first, I'm a husband and a father. I've got two little ones, a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. When I'm not, trying to be a good husband and trying to be a good father, I am a technology executive. So I have a full-time job in the technology space out here in the Bay Area. I'm an engineer by trade. So I've been in technology, building technology products and teams my entire career, essentially, which I absolutely love. I love technology and I love people. So I love building teams. And when I'm not doing all those things, my wife and I do quite a bit of real estate investing. So we invest out of state. And just like many, I guess, real estate investor stories, we've kind of moved on and graduated from just doing investing for ourselves to helping out our, family, friends, coworkers, friends of friends, other people are interested in getting started. So we do a little bit of, helping out and coaching like that on the side. And I guess I've also been known to make a pretty mean pizza. We're a big pizza house. So every Sunday night, that's what we do.
What's your secret pizza? Is it wood fire?
Wood fire, but I actually just got for my 40th birthday here the Gosney pizza ovening, which is fantastic, and it does both gas and or wood, so you could choose. Wood's great; it's authentic and all of that. It just takes a bit more nursing. You got to sit there and take care of the fire, but that's also a good excuse for having a beer, I guess.
Yeah. Why would you ever choose gas if you had wood as an option, though?
It's faster. You could get to the temps much faster than with the wood, basically. But they're both good.
Do I want to eat plain vanilla, or do I want to find it in Switzerland and have some good cream ice cream?
I think next time you're there, you got to check it out.
Got it. Well, I know we've got a lot of different things that we could talk about, and I'm super interested to talk to you about. One being a technology. Both of us kind of busted our careers through technology. Two, father, husband, all those sorts of things. But also investing in real estate. So let's start, since we are a real estate show, with the real estate. Where did your real estate journey begin?
So it began, I was hesitant where to start with that story. I guess my background, my family's background, it's not like we're real estate, tycoons or do anything in real estate per se. It's the same on my wife's side. My parents over there, 70 years or whatever it is now, they've, of course, bought their primary residences. They've also, invested, and all of this is back in Europe, but they've also invested in some real estate, but just as a means to, in Switzerland, frankly, you're better off investing in real estate with a mortgage to not pay, I'm blanking on the term, a wealth tax. So if you had that money, sitting in your bank account, you would be paying a wealth tax for that. So it was just more a reason to not pay that tax and invest in an asset. So that was the exposure that I had to real estate. But it was always kind of in the back of my mind. I always knew, at one point in time, my wife and I were going to buy a primary residence. We were in San Francisco. So we always had the idea of looking for a primary residence that, a small like apartment or condo type place that we could then hold on to and rent out when we choose to buy our, a larger single family home when we have kids and all that. So that was kind of always how we looked at it. And then as I was doing, this research and trying to get ready for buying real estate, whether it be our primary residence or, this condo or like our eventual home, I was doing my homework, typical podcasts and books and whatnot. And I still can't remember where this was because this is many years ago. But I heard this one, maybe host or guest on some show, talk about how they had purchased a rental property for their newborn child, put it on a 15-year mortgage to have the tenants paid off in the 15 years. And by the time their kid was college age, they would have this, $200,000-$300,000 asset that was paid for, that could be refinanced and pay for college, sold to pay for college, use the cash flow to pay for college or whatever it is. And when I heard that, I kind of fell off my chair. It was like, that is a genius idea. And I'm really annoyed and disappointed that I did not think about it myself first. So I like that idea. And that's kind of what kick-started the whole, let's get real serious about this, buy a first rental for our firstborn. Drank that Kool-Aid. Is like, yeah, one's not enough. I want to de-risk. Let's get another one and maybe a third or fourth, because that way they can kind of pay for each other should something happen, should a tenant move out. Then we had a second kid, so we had to buy the second kid their college fund property. So we did that, and that's kind of how we got started essentially. And now we're at a point where we're fortunate enough that the rental portfolio that we have kind of self-funds the next acquisition. So now it's just kind of scaling and building it up, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that about the giving it to your kids for college fund. I still have a single family portfolio myself. We have 2 kids, but 2 of them are assigned houses today that is going to be their college fund. And the way I describe it is like they're both here in Nashville. I could tell you that they will be worth at least double by the time they turn 18. And at that point, if they decide to keep it, live in it, and they want to start their life from that point, I've done my job. If they decide they want to go to college, well, boom, we've had somebody else pay for their college because whoever the tenant was paying down the note and building up the equity in that property.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was thinking about it and just comparing it to even these, and I can't remember which savings plan these are, but for college, the college savings plans where, over 15, 20 years, I'm still the person that has to put the money in every month or every paycheck or whatever. And yes, granted, there will be interest and whatnot that accrues over, 15, 18 years, but I'm still the one needing to find that 200, 300 grand, whatever it is per child. If I went that route, it was like, I'd much rather have somebody else, pay that money basically and have my kid go to school for free. So that was really what started it, I guess, for us.
Yeah, what you're talking about is a 529 plan. And what I actually didn't know when I opened a 529 plan for one of my best friend's first kids is that if they decide not to go to college, all of that money that has accrued and earned is actually now taxable. Like it can only be used for college. And when I found that out, I'm like, that's a scam. You're telling me that if they decide they don't want to go to college, all of a sudden now we have to pay tax on that? That doesn't feel right.
Yeah, exactly.
So where was your first property?
So our first property, I guess, technically was this condo in San Francisco that we bought thinking it would turn out to be a rental. Long story short, we did not keep it as a rental because, COVID and everything, and San Francisco, I guess enough said. But our first rental property was in Northwest Indiana, just outside of Chicago, essentially. And we found a good, solid team out there, people we trusted, other investors that we could kind of tap into as newbie investors to kind of ask all our newbie questions and get kind of a network going. Do you have a good agent there? Do you have a good property manager there? Do you have a good lender, insurance broker, all those, types of key individuals that help kind of run a solid, cash flowing rental portfolio out of state. And we started there essentially because we found the right team, and then I was just shopping around there, and there we go.
So it sounds like an episode of Mythbusters, but like myth number 1 in investing into real estate, you do not have to live in the same town where your real estate is. Now, I will say my first property was, and my second property was, but after property 2, I was like, okay, I understand how to do this now. I just have to go to the right market with the right property.
Yeah. I mean, that myth, I couldn't agree more. Obviously I don't believe in it since we invest exclusively, out of state and remote from where we live. But I also like to think about it like the whole idea when we got into real estate investing was for us to not get a new job, was for us to get something that is, more hands off, uh, maybe passive. I don't like to use that term because there's always stuff involved, but I was not looking for another job and I didn't want another job. And I was telling my wife, I think at the time, even when we started talking about this, that even if we bought the house next door, literally next door as a rental property, I don't want to be the one taking care of it when stuff happens. So I would be working with somebody anyway. And more likely than not, I would not know how to address a lot of the things that happened with this property. So I'm going to be reaching out to somebody anyway. So whether I do it over the phone, over Zoom, because the house is the house next door, or 1,000 miles over, doesn't really make a difference.
That's the key right there. So I mentioned my first property was near where I lived. Actually, it was less than a quarter mile. I could walk to it. And I'm like, oh, eyes and ears in the property. I understand the market, all those sorts of things. The first time I got a call about the HVAC and like the heat wouldn't turn on and it was like September, I was like, I don't know what to do with that. I'm gonna have to call somebody for that. And I think that's when it kind of clicked in my mind, like, oh wait, I'm not very handy. If I swing a hammer, you wouldn't know if I was left-handed or right-handed. So it's really about finding the right team and building the right team around you.
Yeah, 100%.
So what does your portfolio look like today? I know you said before the show you got some stuff in St. Louis, you got some stuff in Northeast, West of Indiana. Like how many doors do you have today?
So yeah, we only do single family homes. That's our bread and butter, what we like the most, and we can get into why and whatnot if we have time and if you want to. But today I think we have 12 doors across Northwest Indiana and St. Louis, and I say I think because I haven't checked in a little bit, but also although we are buy and hold and we plan on holding these assets forever, giving them to our kids when we move on and whatnot, if opportunity knocks on the door and somebody wants to buy one of these properties for the right price, we'll sell it. So we've transacted on things that we've owned for the right reasons and the right price. But that's where we're at right now.
Gotcha. What did you like about those markets? So if you were looking to invest in out of state, why did you pick those markets?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we're in two different markets, so Northwest Indiana and then St. Louis primarily, and we picked those two markets for different reasons. The Northwest Indiana is not where we're most actively investing and growing, but it was because we were connected into a solid team that I ended up building a relationship with, trust, referrals, other investors, referred these folks and whatnot to us. Maybe more importantly, and most importantly, the property manager. So, I mean, it just gelled and it clicked with them, and we worked out a good agreement, and their rates and whatnot worked for us. So, I kind of found that team there first, and because I had the team, I felt confident and comfortable that I could invest there, and that's why we bought the first property there. St. Louis was a bit different because we wanted to diversify. We wanted to not be just exclusively in that one market. So I started looking at other markets, and it was a process of elimination pretty much for me. Is like, we wanted, and we still look for cash flowing properties. I don't want to have to come out of pocket on anything that we own, betting on appreciation over time. We never know where that goes. It's basically a gamble, even though sure, probably with a long enough time horizon, things will appreciate, but stuff happens and you don't know when you need to sell, refi, exchange assets or whatever. So we ruled out both coasts essentially because those are primarily, cyclical markets. And then for me, it's like we ruled out most of the South for primarily like, ecological and weather concerns. I mean, I don't know what Florida is going to be like in 50 years when we hand these properties to our kids, hurricanes, floods, so on and so forth. So it kind of ruled out the South, and then that left the Midwest. And then in the Midwest, we wanted to look at cities that were large enough that there was a diverse, tenant pool, diverse job, employer pool, enough options, when it comes to property management, subcontractors, your specialists and whatnot, not just your, tiny 1,000 person town where you've got one person that has a part-time job as a property manager. So it kind of narrowed it down real fast. And then when we were looking at these markets at the time, every single person seemed to go invest in Indianapolis and Kansas City. So it's like, why would I go there if that's where everybody's going and I'm just going to have more competition? And at the time, not many people seemed to be talking about St. Louis. So we landed on St. Louis. And, after doing a bit more due diligence, one of the things that I really liked about that particular market, it's very diverse in terms of different asset class, so single families, lower end, prior lower price point single families, higher price point neighborhoods and single families, small residential units all over parts of the city, larger commercial units, depending on, where you're looking at in the city. So just had a lot of opportunity if we wanted to change and kind of, move through like our investment asset class, depending on like the environment really. And
I
that's why
loved
we
a couple
landed
things
there.
that you said there, and I want to repeat them. One, you kind of ruled out the East Coast, the coast, because they are very cyclical and tend
Yeah.
to be very pricey. Like the coast of the country don't really cash flow from what I've seen. So having a clear investment goal that you want cash flow was key there. And then two, I feel the same way about some of the Bay areas in Texas and some of the areas in the Gulf and some of the areas in Florida around. I don't think that climate change and seawater rising will affect me in my lifetime if I own properties within 10 miles of there. But certainly, as we're starting to see, insurers will become aware that hurricanes and floods and things like that are happening more
Exactly.
frequently, and insurance costs will rise. And I don't want to be left holding the bag when it's time to sell an asset where all of a sudden insurance costs have gone up 400, 500%, things like that.
Or when you hand these properties to your kids, if that's what you want to do, right? Which is our case, right? When they have them for another 30 years, right? We're talking 80, 100 years from now, they might still own these. I don't know what it's going to be like down there, with the climate change and all. So that's why we ruled that part of the country out.
Now, I don't know a lot about St. Louis, so this might be a little bit ignorant, but I've heard that St. Louis has a few rough parts in the town. So as a out-of-state investor, how do you make sure that you stay clear away from the block by block? This block's a good block, that block's a bad block.
Yeah. So first, I think that statement is totally fair and accurate. And I say that without being a St. Louis native or without claiming I'm a St. Louis expert. That being said, we've been investing there for several years now. So we're starting to know our way around a bit. But, I think it's a few things you can pull up. There's a whole bunch of online tools, right, that just give you crime statistics and crime maps. So you can kind of, just yourself on your own at your computer kind of map those out and figure out what areas are not the best from a kind of safety or crime perspective. I think more importantly for us was talking to our team, but also finding other investors in that same market who know the market or maybe even are local to that market and asking them to say, hey, I'm looking at this zip code or this neighborhood or this street. What do you know? What's it like? So it's like asking the people who know. And then one other thing, part of our like buy box or our purchase criteria for our single family rentals, we have a criteria in there that is all about like the school district, the school neighborhood. And we look specifically at the school rating, the cumulative school rating for that particular area. And we want it to be within a certain threshold. And that basically, rules out any higher, crime area in the city as well, just because that's what we look for. And the main reason for us doing that is the premise being, slightly better schools, typically, 3-bed, 2-bath, with the basement homes, families move in, they stay longer because their kids are in a decent, school district. So that helped us as well kind of rule out those sketchier areas. But still today, every time we purchase a property, I'll check with property manager and obviously the agent who's walking the property, say, what's the neighborhood like? And they'll be real quick to tell you yay or nay, even to the point where our property manager has some zip codes that they will not take properties to manage in.
I was getting ready to say, first and foremost, if you have a property manager who won't manage a property in a neighborhood, don't buy, no matter what the price is. That is not the right neighborhood to buy in.
Nope.
So when you're buying average 3x2 in St. Louis, like what is the average price range today?
Today, close to 200, probably like 175, 200. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Again,
way higher than I
where
thought.
we look, the type of house that we look at, the neighborhoods that we look at. I mean, if you want the better school, areas and whatnot, you can go as high as 600, right? There's a little bit of everything, which is also what I like about St. Louis.
Yeah, I mean, 200,000 is way more on a price point than I thought you were going to say. And when I think of typical large Midwest towns, I think of like under $100,000 home price still.
I mean, there are plenty of those in St.
There are.
Louis,
Yeah.
not plenty of those that we will look at.
Gotcha. Well, I want to hit you with a couple objections that I've seen kind of growing my single family portfolio, and I want to hear how you overcome them or what your thoughts are.
Let's do it.
So the first one is, as I scaled my single family portfolio, one thing that kind of bothered me is it was very lumpy when big things happen. So first and foremost, I believe that if you're in this business, you should always set aside reserves, because it's not a matter of if something will happen, it's a matter of when. And for me, I had two things that happened in the same year, actually in this back-to-back months. I had an HVAC unit go out in one place and then flood damage in another. And that basically wiped out my cash flow for the entire year on those properties. So first of all, like, how are you absorbing some of these larger CapEx expenses that happen on these properties from time to time?
Yeah, so there's a few things I think that come into play here. The first is really when we're looking at the property itself and offering on the property itself. So we will take a deep dive, extensive look at these big systems. So roof, electrical, windows, HVAC, water tanks, sump pumps, all of these things. And depending on their age, depending on the, what we could tell from the agent walking the property or the inspection on the property, we will take that into consideration and, typically be pretty aggressive in asking for concessions when we're buying. So we're already trying to go into this accounting for as much as we possibly can. Sometimes we get the seller to pay for some of these replacements. Sometimes you just get these larger price reductions that then allow us to go in before we rent it out and, fix these things up. So that's, I think, step number one is just when we're acquiring these properties. And then I'd say step number two is we're just very conservative with our numbers. We just put a large amount of money aside every month to cover for future, CapEx items. So when things happen, we typically have a reserve set aside that is commensurate to what might happen, and then have that ready to deploy and fix whatever happens when it happens without it impacting our cash flow. So, I mean, I've seen a lot of, investors and people trying to sell, turnkey solutions or, courses or whatever that will run numbers like purchase. So mortgage, so rent minus mortgage minus property taxes, and that's your cash flow. And like,
Not even close.
Not even close. I have like 8 rows in my spreadsheet that says, rent minus, mortgage minus, taxes minus all these other things. Then I have my cash flow. And because we run our numbers conservatively, then we're in a position where our reserves are where they need to be for when stuff happens.
Yeah, I mean, my general rule of thumb for my single family portfolio today is set aside 10% of the rent, not the profit, the rent, into a separate account, as that's my slush fund for when things happen. Is that kind of your general rule of thumb?
So yeah, we have 10% for CapEx slush fund, but then we have an additional 10% for just like your ongoing repairs. So like the faucets, the sink's clogged,
yep,
right? Or the screen door broke, right? That's not CapEx, but so we already have 20% off the top just for these types of things. And then we have another, I don't know the exact percentage, but it's like a $750 a year kind of, fixed sum for just turn reserves. So every time the tenant leaves and we have to paint, fix a doorknob, whatever, we put that aside. So we, like I said, we have 7 or 8 items that we take off the top of the rent before we consider like our free and available cash flow.
Right. And so I want to make a very clear distinction. That is not your cash flow, the stuff you're setting aside. That is set aside money for when things happen. The rest is cash flow. So my next question is, do you have like a typical cash on cash that you look for with that number?
Yeah. So the dollar amount of the free cash flow, again, free. So whatever's left that you use beer money or burn the money. And I'd say that intentionally to mean everything else is accounted for. Turn costs, PM fees, mortgage, everything's already accounted for, CapEx and all that. That dollar amount is less important to me than how hard is my money working that I put into acquiring this asset? So if it's making these numbers up, but if, I'm putting $50,000 into buying an asset, a single family home, right, where it's down payment plus repairs plus closing costs and all of that, I want to know how hard that 50 grand in this example is working for me. And in today's, banking and lending environment, you could get 5% in a savings account, right? So when I'm looking to buy a single family home, I want that hypothetical $50,000 to work, harder than the 5% it could get sitting in a savings account where I have zero risk. So today we're looking for a minimum of 8%. And that's what's more important to us than the actual dollar amount of what that cash flow represents. But I think from a performance perspective, we're averaging 12%, I think, when I look at our numbers. So that's more or less where we're at right now.
Yeah, I want to highlight, because it keeps coming up when I'm having conversations with investors, is that, yes, you can go get a treasury bill for 5% or a savings account for roughly 5% today. And when Nathan says 8%, people are like, well, that's only 5, 6, 7, 8, 3% difference. That's not worth the risk. The only thing I would caveat that with is that 8% is mostly tax-free because you're using the depreciation to offset it. So you're getting an 8% true rate of return. Whereas when you take taxes out from your savings account or your CDs or something like that, you're really looking at a 4% real rate of return.
Hey, fellow investors, before we dive into our next segment of the show, I wanted to take a quick moment to talk to you about a fantastic opportunity for you to invest with me. As you know, here at Ice Cream with Investors, I'm passionate about real estate investing and helping you navigate the exciting world of wealth creation through real estate. And that's why, for the first time, I'm thrilled to tell you about an opportunity for you to invest alongside of me. Over the past 3 years, I've been investing in multifamily, mobile home parks, car washes. I've even become the bank and lent out money to fellow real estate investors on a short-term basis. And now you can come join me. If you would like to jump on a call and learn more about this opportunity, head to icecreamwithinvestors.com/invest and find a time for us to connect. And now back to the show.
Well, yeah, so 100%. I think even more so than that, right? That is not accounted for in this 8%. That's really just the 8%, $50,000 in this example, money working at 8%. But you need to factor into your point, taxes is one thing, appreciation on the property is another, mortgage pay down is another, right? These are conservative numbers as well. So like I said, we effectively are running around 12%. So if you add all those things up, it's a lot more than 8%. But I just to look at that 8% as the easier benchmark to compare things at. But I mean, if I look at a property that you own for 10 years, 15, 30, whatever, when you look at with mortgage pay down and everything else, it's a whole lot more than 8%.
That's right. All right. Second objection that I have in the single family space is that what people don't tell you is that when you enter this space, after 10 loans, Fannie and Freddie won't lend to you anymore. So you have to go find an in-house bank, a commercial bank. You have to restructure your debt into a portfolio loan or just something like that. So that's actually what got me into the commercial space. Is I was at my 10 single family units. I go to apply for a new mortgage to make an acquisition, and my typical lender said, "Hey, I can't lend to you anymore. You're great on paper. You're making great money. You've got great cash flow. These properties are doing great, but I can't sell this to Fannie and Freddie." So how did you overcome that? Because with 12, you obviously have different lenders now. So how did you overcome that?
Yeah, and there's another thing as well that I hear a lot about that. So first of all, that is true. Those 10 Fannie Freddie loans also can change over time depending on Fannie and Freddie's regulations. Right? I think at one point in time, not too many years ago, the number was actually 4, right? So it could change at any point in time. But even more so, I've heard people talk about how it's 10 per social security number per individual. So if you're married with your spouse, you really get 20. So you could do these 20 properties. That sounds great on paper, but it's not that simple either, because they then look at each individual on their own and can they actually hold those mortgages and do they make enough income to actually cover that debt on their own? So in our case, we have a very uneven income between my wife and I. Of course, we file jointly and all that stuff, so it doesn't really matter. But in our situation, it's not like we could actually go and get the 10 for her and 10 for me. So that's a myth that I think needs to be called out, because it's always sold as, well, just get 10 in your name and 10 in her name and you're good. But to answer your question, I mean, there's so much more money than there are deals. Always, today, tomorrow, always, that there's plenty of ways to find the money. And when we ran out, I mean, I actually still work with the same lender that gave me our first 10 Fannie Freddie loans. They just have a product, a loan, basically, that they can keep in-house. So it's, it's an 11th, a 12th, it doesn't matter. They, can hold it in-house. That's fine. You have, lenders these DSCR lenders, right, that specialize in looking at, can the property pay for itself and cover the loan? And if that's the case, they don't even look at you, right? There's, large networks of friends and family that have money, 401ks that are, parked from a former employer that they could put to work. So there's plenty of ways to get the money.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's the part, that little bit of friction there said for me and my journey was like, okay, is there a different way to do this? And that's why I decided to shift. Yeah. It is not an end all be all. I mean, I'm talking to 3 or 4 local banks right now that will lend against my stock portfolio. And you being a tech executive, you probably have a ton of options where you don't have to sell your stocks to go invest it.
Absolutely
you don't
not.
have to sell your stocks to pay the tax to go invest. You can just borrow against your stocks to go invest. And now being at large tech companies for a while, I've got enough in my portfolio that almost covers a mortgage for a lot of these homes that we're talking about today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to find the money. It's much easier today than it was in the past, I think. Even just looking at these DSCR lenders, they're easy to find, and that's all they do. So if you find a good asset, they'll just lend on it, and they don't care about your background.
Yep. All right. Last and final myth is that when you look at a commercial property, you are valuing the property based off of the income that it produces. In the single family space, you are basing it off of the comps or what was sold next door. Very similar asset that was recently sold. So you don't have the ability really to force appreciation like you would in a commercial asset. How do you think about appreciation when you're buying single family homes?
I don't know if that's entirely true, right? Because you could go in and fix up and rehab your single family property to make it look nicer than the one around the corner, and you've forced your appreciation that way, right? So you can do that. That it's true. What you're saying is true, right? And I don't contest it or disagree with it. It's not a driving factor for me. I actually prefer having the flexibility of a single family home that if I needed to sell it, there's a whole lot more buyers who are willing to buy a 3-bed, 2-bath single family home in St. Louis or Northwest Indiana than there are people looking to buy a 30-unit building, right? So if I had to get rid of it for whatever reason, I have that flexibility. So that's what's more important to me. That being said, it was back to an earlier comment I made. I think it's also about buying right? You make your money when you buy, not when you sell. So if you do the work to find the right properties and you get them at a good price, right? The forced appreciation is not something that I'm terribly worried with, even though, we could fix it up and make it look real nice if we wanted to and force appreciation that way.
Yeah, I would also say based off our conversation, it sounds like you are very clear on what your goals are with investing. Hey, I want to give these down to kids. You still have a few decades hopefully left in you, and your kids have even more decades left in you than you. And so if you're just growing at a consistent 2 to 5% every single year, I mean, you divide that by 72 and basically you're doubling your appreciation over the course of like 12 years. So it's a different game. I think you're playing a cash flow legacy game than how do I take an asset, rehab it, make it more valuable and sell it.
Exactly. Oh yeah. That's totally different. So absolutely. Yeah. For us, it's more like I said, I was boring, vanilla ice cream, right? I just want it to be easy, simple, cash flowing, build appreciation over time, get tenant pay down, and then we'll have something that helps in our retirement as well as something we can give to our kids when we move on.
Yep. Well, I want to switch us now really quickly and talk about the fact that you've got a lot of plates spinning. So, husband, father, technology executive, part-time coach with the real estate, also investing out of state, and just juggling a lot of different things. And I know when we first had the opportunity to connect and talk, that was a big portion of our conversation and different tools that we use to kind of help us automate a lot of the mundane in our life and offload anything that doesn't bring value. I wanted to see if you could just, it's not really a direct question, but could you give us some tips on like, how do you automate some of your life? And then maybe I'll find something in there that we can dig in further.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's also a hard one to answer in the sense that, first of all, I don't know that I can remember all the things I've automated, but also there are so many things that I've kind of put process and or automation around that it'll be hard to get into all of them. But I think for me, it starts with, and this is not necessarily an automation thing. I see it more as a productivity, maybe organization thing. It's just, I use my calendar. I mean, I use it a lot. I have absolutely everything in my calendar, from sleep time to exercise, read, kind of relax time, to time with my wife, to time with my kids, to W2 time, coaching time, all of that. And everything I do is basically managed through my calendar. And pretty much anything that requires some of my time or attention gets added there through, tools like Calendly and other things like that. So if I don't have the time in the calendar, then, it gets scheduled for some other point in time. And that allows me to keep focus on what's most important, keep my time and my days organized. So I know, when am I doing W2? When am I doing real estate? When am I doing coaching? When am I doing family time? And those times remain untouched and unchanged. Like, I'm not taking real estate calls when I'm, having breakfast with my kids. The other thing as well, this is like I don't know, again, maybe a productivity hack. I'm not really sure, but mindset maybe. But I essentially try to forget everything that comes into my mind. I want to put it down in some tool, some reminder app, some to-do list, something somewhere, so that I don't ever have to remember anything, because there's just so much coming and going, to the point where, like, when I'm looking at a property, I see it pop up, you get your automated emails from Zillow or whatever tool you use. If I'm interested in it, but it just popped up on the market, and it's not something I'm going to act on now because I want to let it sit for a bit longer, see how motivated the sellers are. If you're on your phone, I know iOS, because that's what I use. I'm assuming Android has the same thing, but you could just share that listing from Zillow to the reminders app and say, set a reminder in 20 days. And then I've forgotten about it. And 20 days later, I get the reminder, say, hey, go look at this property. Here's the link. And if it's still on the market, we'll do deeper due diligence, right? We have, automations through, Zapier and other tools like that, that just, when a new listing pops up on Zillow that meets or matches our buy box and our investment criteria, it'll automatically bring it to our deal analysis tool, so that I could just open it up and I get notified that there's a new one that meets our criteria. It's in the deal analysis tool, and I could just look at it and see, red or green, yay or nay. Trying to think, what are the other big ones?
How many zaps do you have set up?
20, because I've maxed out. I saw it yesterday. I've maxed out the tier I'm paying for.
Yeah, I'm on the free version now. I know I just started playing with the tool about a month ago. Yeah. And man, it is amazing. And it's also something that I don't even truly understand the power to it yet, because it's so amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Email management for me, like reminders, sending stuff to people. The deal analysis tool that I use, same thing. You can, if you get the numbers to work for you, so it imports automatically. It'll tell you how close it is to meeting your numbers, your investment return numbers. Then there's an option to automatically set a purchase price that you want to offer at, so that it meets your investment criteria. So I can automate that. Then it can automate generating a report that then automates the email I send to my agent with that report to say, hey, I'm interested in this one. Just, make this offer. So I spend no more than 20 minutes a day on the real estate stuff. And of the 20 minutes, I want to say 18 minutes are looking for the next property, not managing my existing portfolio.
Yeah. We when we're done with this, I want you to show me how you automated some of that stuff, because I understand, again, the very basic level, but I know you can write custom APIs, which as a software engineer you're probably pretty good at. As a guy
I've
that
had
doesn't
time
even
to
know how to
play with
hook up
it.
a
Yeah.
printer, yeah, as a guy that doesn't know how to hook up a printer over here, it's a little bit more difficult to me. But I think the key from what I heard from that is this idea of like getting it out of your mind and putting it in some place that you know where it is.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I am starting to try to do more in my life is I see an article and I don't want to have 5,000 tabs open on my desktop at all time. Let me just throw that into Notion. And then I've got a block on my calendar on Sundays that I
Yeah.
go through and catalog that, delete it, read it, and decide if it's worth keeping or not. So it's little things like that you don't understand how much mental space those things are taking up until you start implementing some of those things.
Yeah. So one of the things I did for that specifically is you can automate pulling that article into the Readwise app, and then it will summarize it for you and read it to you. So then you can get like, that whole article read to you, in a summary version in a matter of minutes instead of, having to spend the 20 minutes or so reading. So again, that's both automation and kind of getting the most out of my every minute of every day, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we are going to nerd out after this, so I hope you
Yeah.
blocked off the rest of your day. Nathan, I want to switch us to our last round. We're calling these the 4 toppings. Our first one is, what is your favorite book, or what is a book you've read recently that's given you a paradigm shift?
I think one of my favorite, there's a lot of books that I like, but the one that I typically like to give is Adam Grant's Give and Take. And it's not a real estate book, but it's a book that for me just fundamentally changed my understanding of how generous people and givers, hence the name of the book, typically end ahead in life over takers and selfish people who just want to take other people's time, attention, money, whatever it may be. And the book is a great read in the sense that he's a what does he call himself? Adam Grant. He's a organizational psychologist, I think. So it's like
Yep.
it's like a study and science backed, data driven book on how givers end up ahead in life. And I just, generally speaking, I believe in giving. I believe I'm a generous individual. That's why we kind of do this, free coaching and helping and all of this stuff. So it just resonated well. And I appreciated seeing like a data backed kind of scientific view on the topic.
I love it. I love it. Our second one is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I don't know that one because something that comes to mind. I don't think it was ever given to me by my parents as advice, but I think it's one thing. I think it's more upbringing than advice. My brother, sister, and I were all brought up in a family of a very strong work ethic. So work hard, work well, finish the job. Don't just paint the side of the fence that you could see from the street. You do the whole fence and all of that. And I think that upbringing just helped me get prepared for life, frankly. And, nothing's given to you for free, right? So, yeah, I don't know if the advice maybe is work hard and do a good job. I don't know.
Yeah. I forgot who said it, but there's an athlete out there that was like, hey, you give it your all no matter who you're playing. And they were like, yeah, because somebody spent their hard-earned money to see me play today, and that might be the only time they ever see me play in my life, and I want to make sure that they got to see the best version of me.
Yeah.
And I grew up playing sports, so I really, really liked that story. Stuck with me as I kind of grew older.
Yeah.
Our third one is, what are you most proud of in your life?
That's a hard one. I think it's being where I am now, meaning successful career that I like, fantastic family that I love. We have time to experience things together. We were talking before we hit record that, we were just in Mexico last week. We're all loving, caring, our kids have what they need. We're building kind of this future for ourselves and our kids. And I appreciate that that's not given to everyone, right? Or anyone. So being where we are and having gone through the work, the hours, the time, the effort, the exercise to build this life for, myself, I'm the one answering the question, but like for our family, is probably what I'm most proud of.
Yeah. Well, our fourth and final one is, if you could sit down and eat a bowl of ice cream with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
That's an easy one for me. Nelson Mandela. We named our son Nelson. My wife and I met in South Africa. I traveled a lot in South Africa. I actually got to meet Nelson Mandela at an event that I was organizing as a teenager out in Durban, South Africa. So there's just a lot of family meaning to the name and the individual, but the why is maybe enough said, but just what he went through, and, being in prison and tortured and treated like, dog crap for 27 years or whatever it was. And then come out of that and still be like, hey, you know what? I forgive you, and let's become one people and make this country great. I mean, being able to do that I don't know who else could do that.
So Nathan, before we were started recording, barged in on another podcast that I had at the right time, by the way. So I'm just kidding. But it's funny you said that, because the podcast before that, they said somebody that is on my list. And you just said another one. I think Nelson Mandela, for everything that he went through, to be thrown in prison, ripped from his family, tortured, beaten, abused, spit on, meaningless work, taking rocks from one end of the yard to the other, only to have to bring them back. And then to come out and forgive everybody, and then bring them into the government that he formed and said, you represent a part of the population that is South African, and we need to speak to everybody, takes such a big man. And sure, he had his faults from what I've learned and what I've read, but man, that just how you do that is just something that I would love to share a bowl of ice cream and understand with him. So
same
I
here.
love the answer. Love it. Nathan, I appreciate you coming on. It's been awesome to spend this time with you. If our listeners wanted to reach out to you, learn more about what you've got going on, or just connect with you, where is the best place we could point them?
Yeah, the easiest place to go, and more importantly, to not make the same mistakes that we did when we got started in real estate investing, is to just go to readyforrealestatechecklist.com. And there's a free checklist that we hand out there to people that are interested in getting started. It's like it holds your hand through, do all these things and you'll be ready. And there's all the contact information there as well. So that's how you can get a hold of us. But yeah, that's the best place, readyforrealestatechecklist.com.
Awesome. We will leave that in the show notes. And then Nathan, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It was awesome.
Thank you for listening to Ice Cream with Investors. If you like what we serve you here, it would mean the world to me if you would like, subscribe, and leave a review on your favorite podcast app.